In a single, breathtaking moment, everything changes. A radiant wedding day turns into a battleground of secrets and betrayal, where a loyal guardian's silent warnings unveil a hidden darkness beneath a charming facade. Brace yourself for a journey through love, deception, and ultimate redemption. Subscribe now and join the unfolding saga of a woman who dares to reclaim her destiny. Amalia awoke to a sunrise that painted the sky with soft hues of gold and pink, promising a day that should have been filled with hope and joy. The delicate rays streamed through gauzy white curtains, casting a gentle glow on the polished hardwood floors of her bedroom. Today was meant to be the culmination of years of dreaming, a day when she would finally marry Daniel, the man who had captured her heart with his charm, confidence, and seemingly impeccable character. In the quiet of the morning, as Amalia delicately brushed her hair and carefully prepared for the day ahead, a nagging sensation tugged at her. It wasn't just the natural jitters of a major life event. It was a feeling that something was amiss. Daniel, with his refined manners and effortless elegance, had always been the center of her admiration. His warm smile and intelligent banter had swept her off her feet, and the world around them had cheered their union. Yet, beneath the surface of this idyllic love story lay a secret unease that even the radiant sunshine could not dispel. At the foot of her bed lounged Knox, her loyal German shepherd, whose amber eyes shone with a piercing intensity that Amalia had never seen before. For years, Knox had been her steadfast companion, a playful, affectionate creature who had grown from a clumsy puppy into a dignified guardian. But recently, his behavior had shifted in subtle yet unnerving ways. His gaze often lingered on Daniel with a quiet wariness, and his ears pricked at the slightest sound, as if warning of an impending threat. Amalia tried to dismiss these oddities as mere pre-wedding anxiety, convinced that her mind was playing tricks on her. While her thoughts vacillated between excitement and dread, the apartment buzzed with the frenetic energy of final preparations. Friends and family milled about, offering words of encouragement and congratulation. Every detail had been meticulously planned, from the exquisite lace of her wedding gown to the delicate floral arrangements that adorned every corner. And yet, amid the celebratory chaos, Knox remained a quiet enigma. His silent vigil by the bed hinted at an inner conflict that Amalia couldn't quite decipher, a tension that seemed to echo the unspoken uncertainties in her own heart. Despite the swirling doubts, Amalia resolved to trust the happiness she had so long envisioned. Today was the day she would step into a future with Daniel, leaving behind the shadows of past disappointments. As she gazed into the mirror one last time before leaving for the venue, she could almost convince herself that all was well. With each steady breath, she tried to banish the apprehension gnawing at her, unaware that the subtle warnings from Knox were only the first signs of a storm that would soon shatter her carefully constructed world. The morning light had grown stronger by the time Amalia reached the reception hall, a grand, elegantly decorated venue that seemed to celebrate every hope and dream she had nurtured. The guests' murmurs of anticipation filled the air, mingling with the soft strains of classical music. Yet, as Amalia stepped forward, a peculiar sight made her pause. Knox, who had been quietly following her every step, began positioning himself in a way that was both protective and foreboding. Whenever Daniel approached or exchanged a smile with her, Knox's body stiffened, and his eyes darkened with a look that bordered on defiance. At first, Amalia attributed this behavior to an overprotective instinct born out of his long-held affection for her. But as the day unfolded, his actions grew increasingly deliberate. When Daniel offered a reassuring pat on her shoulder or leaned in for a kiss, Knox would interpose himself, standing as a silent barrier between the couple. The initial awkward chuckles from the guests soon gave way to a lingering tension, a shared sense of uncertainty that spread like ripples through a calm pond. In the private moments between rehearsals and final touches, Amalia tried to understand the subtle signs. Knox's unusual vigilance was not just a fleeting anomaly. It was a consistent pattern that had emerged over the past few weeks. Late at night, as the world slept, she'd woken to find him standing guard at the bedroom door, his posture rigid, his body alert as if he were guarding against some invisible menace. On another occasion, he had curled up in front of Daniel's carefully arranged belongings, his eyes darting nervously between the groom and the mysterious items that now lay within the closet. Despite these unsettling incidents, Daniel maintained his calm and collected demeanor. He suggested, with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes, that perhaps Knox needed a break, maybe even to be temporarily rehomed until after the wedding. The idea troubled Amalia deeply. The thought of parting with the dog who had been her confidant and protector for years was unbearable. Yet, she hesitated, wondering if maybe this was the necessary sacrifice for the sake of a flawless celebration. The tension between her affection for Knox and her desire for a perfect day clashed within her, each tugging her in opposite directions. Throughout the ceremony's rehearsals, whispers circulated among the staff and close friends. Some recalled how Knox had previously reacted to strangers and certain scents, his behavior hinting at a deeper sensitivity that went beyond mere loyalty. Still, Amalia clung to the hope that love and trust would guide her through this day. As the clock ticked closer to the official start of the wedding, she gathered herself, determined to believe that every sign, even those from her beloved Knox, could be explained away as mere pre-wedding jitters, a temporary disruption before the perfection of forever. But as the final preparations were made, a lingering question remained. Was Knox's protective stance simply the manifestation of his deep love for Amalia, or was it a warning of a hidden danger lurking behind Daniel's charismatic smile? With each passing moment, the tension in the air grew, setting the stage for revelations that would soon shake the very foundations of Amalia's life. In the soft light of the afternoon, with the echoes of the early celebration still resonating, Amalia retreated to a quiet corner of the venue to gather her thoughts. The air was perfumed with fresh flowers and the faint aroma of gourmet delicacies, but inside, a storm was brewing. The warmth of the day did little to thaw the chill of uncertainty that had lodged itself in her heart. She remembered every peculiar moment, Knox's unwavering gaze, the subtle growls, and the way he seemed to bar any attempt by Daniel to get too close. Was it possible that her faithful companion was trying to tell her something? Sitting alone in the shadow of a grand archway, Amalia's mind began to unravel the events of the past few weeks. She recalled the gentle warnings she had dismissed as mere anxiety, now accumulating into a formidable tapestry of doubt. Daniel's charm, once so alluring and comforting, was now being questioned. The inconsistencies in his stories, the evasiveness about his past, and that unnerving possessiveness that had surfaced in moments of confrontation, all formed a collage of red flags. Her heart, once buoyed by the promise of a happily ever after, now hesitated at the precipice of a dangerous truth. Unable to shake the disquiet, Amalia sought solace in conversation with her closest confidant, Lauren, a longtime friend known for her intuitive grasp of people's true natures. Over a quiet cup of coffee in a secluded corner of the venue, Lauren listened intently as Amalia recounted every unsettling detail. "Maybe Knox senses something you can't see," Lauren suggested softly, her eyes reflecting both concern and understanding. "Dogs are incredibly perceptive. They pick up on things we often overlook." This idea, while initially comforting, soon grew into a persistent worry. Amalia began to question the narrative she had so carefully built around her relationship with Daniel. How could she have ignored the subtle signals that Knox had been sending her all along? Each memory now felt charged with hidden meaning. Daniel's seemingly benign remarks, the dismissive way he brushed off Knox's protests, and the way he'd once suggested that the dog needed to be kept away, even temporarily, from her side. The seed of doubt had been planted firmly in Amalia's heart. Every smile from Daniel, every reassuring touch, now carried the potential for deceit. And yet, in the midst of these turbulent thoughts, there was a sliver of hope, a belief that perhaps the love she had felt was real, that the chaos of the moment was but a temporary disturbance. As she sat there with Lauren's comforting presence beside her, Amalia found herself at a crossroads, her emotions warring between the desire to trust and the urgent need to heed the warnings that Knox, her ever-loyal guardian, had been trying to convey. Even as the final touches were made and the venue prepared to welcome the guests for the ceremony, Amalia's inner turmoil grew. The gentle murmur of voices, the clinking of glasses, and the rustle of silk dresses formed a stark contrast to the tumult within her. The idyllic promise of a new beginning seemed to hang by a fragile thread, threatened by shadows of doubt that had been patiently nurtured in the quiet moments of reflection. And so, with every passing minute, Amalia braced herself for what the day might reveal, aware that the truth, however painful, would soon demand to be faced. The ceremony had reached its climax. Amid a hush that fell over the elegantly decorated garden, Amalia stood at the threshold of her destiny. The aisle was adorned with delicate petals, each step forward a measured beat in the heart of the celebration. Guests watched expectantly as she prepared to cross that sacred line. Yet, just as she stepped forward, a sudden, unmistakable movement arrested everyone's attention. Knox, who had trotted obediently by her side all morning, halted abruptly. His posture transformed from gentle calm to fierce determination. As Daniel stepped toward her with a reassuring smile, the loyal dog positioned himself squarely between them. His amber eyes locked onto Daniel's, and in that charged moment, time seemed to suspend. The gentle murmur of the gathered crowd was replaced by a heavy silence, a pregnant pause filled with anticipation and dread. Amalia's heart pounded as she tried to process what was happening. In that instant, the symbolism was impossible to ignore. The creature that had been her constant protector was now an implacable barrier, preventing the union she had long dreamed of. The beauty of the moment was marred by a growing, inexplicable foreboding. It was as if Knox was trying to tell her that everything she believed in was built on a foundation of lies. Every eye in the garden fixed on the scene, and murmurs of disbelief began to ripple through the crowd. Daniel's expression, once filled with gentle affection, now betrayed a flicker of surprise and something else. For a heartbeat, his eyes softened into an unreadable mixture of regret and anger, as if he, too, recognized the gravity of the situation. Meanwhile, Amalia's gaze fell to the loyal animal at her side. In the silence that followed, she felt an inner strength surge forth, a quiet realization that her instincts, embodied in Knox's unwavering stance, could no longer be ignored. The moment stretched, heavy with meaning, until finally, the tension broke like a fragile glass. Amalia stepped back, her eyes never leaving Knox, whose silent defiance now spoke louder than any word could. The graceful progress of the ceremony was shattered in an instant, and as the echoes of the interrupted vows faded into anxious whispers, Amalia was forced to confront the undeniable truth. Her wedding day had taken an unexpected turn, and the warning signs that she had once dismissed were now impossible to overlook. In that charged moment of reckoning, Amalia understood that the life she had planned with Daniel was built on deception, a realization that would forever change the course of her future. The stunned silence of the garden was shattered by chaos. As Knox lunged forward with a force that defied his usually measured gait, the delicate calm of the ceremony was replaced by a maelstrom of shock and disbelief. Guests recoiled, their eyes wide with terror, while the carefully orchestrated music stuttered into discord. The crisp, white petals scattered from the aisle, marking the disruption with poignant symbolism, a celebration now turned battlefield. Daniel's reaction was immediate yet unexpected. In a split second, the groom who had once exuded confidence and warmth now found himself thrust into a confrontation he had clearly underestimated. His polished facade began to crumble as he reached out, attempting to shove Knox away. But the loyal dog would not relent. Instead, he pressed forward, his stance both defensive and resolute. The once harmonious scene transformed into a tableau of tension. Daniel's eyes flashed with a mix of fury and disbelief, while Amalia, frozen at the edge of the aisle, struggled to process the unfolding events. Amid the turmoil, a voice emerged from the crowd, a woman whose trembling hands held a smartphone. Her eyes, wide with urgency, met Amalia's, and in a hushed tone barely audible above the commotion, she said, "You need to see this." The crowd's murmurs grew louder as the woman navigated her phone, displaying images and snippets of messages that painted a starkly different picture of Daniel than the one Amalia had always believed. Whispers spread like wildfire through the assembled guests, and every glance between familiar faces was now laden with skepticism. For a moment, time seemed to stand still. The stunning images on the phone, proof of past deceptions and shattered promises, spoke louder than any words could. Amelia's heart pounded as she struggled to reconcile the man she had trusted with the evidence of betrayal now laid bare before her. Each image was a fragment of a larger truth, a truth that had been hidden behind well-rehearsed smiles and carefully crafted lies. The revelations cut deep, unearthing memories of past warnings that had been dismissed as mere coincidences. Daniel's face, once the picture of composure, now contorted with a mix of indignation and desperation. His attempts to dismiss the evidence were clumsy and ineffective. "This is all a mistake," he insisted, his voice quivering as he tried to regain control. But the damage was done. The carefully constructed illusion had crumbled, leaving nothing but raw, unfiltered reality. The once celebratory atmosphere was now replaced by an overwhelming sense of betrayal and disillusionment. In that moment of public unraveling, Amalia felt a surge of clarity. The masked perfection she had once admired was nothing more than a facade, carefully maintained at the expense of truth. With the eyes of the entire crowd upon her, she realized that the life she had planned with Daniel was built on deception. As whispers turned to murmurs of sympathy and outrage, Amalia took a trembling step back. The loyal figure of Knox, still standing guard, affirmed her newfound resolve. The chaos at the altar was not just a disruption. It was the painful, necessary shattering of an illusion that had threatened to bind her to a future of lies. In the aftermath of the chaotic interruption, the garden that once promised an enchanted beginning now served as a silent witness to shattered dreams. Amelia's world, once filled with visions of a happily ever after, had splintered into fragments of harsh truth. As the guests slowly recovered from their shock, their hushed conversations wove a tapestry of uncertainty around the broken ceremony. Amid the whispers, a chilling revelation began to emerge, a dark secret that had been carefully concealed beneath layers of charm and sophistication. Retreating to a quiet alcove away from prying eyes, Amalia clutched her phone with trembling fingers. The images and messages displayed before her were damning. They painted a portrait of a man who had been nothing more than a master manipulator, a con artist who had deceived countless women with his meticulously crafted persona. Each message was a fragment of his past, a series of encounters that ended in heartbreak and betrayal. The evidence was irrefutable, a stark contrast to the man who had once promised her a lifetime of love and devotion. Every detail of Daniel's past, his vague explanations, his evasive responses, and the carefully timed charm, now took on a sinister hue. Amelia's mind raced, connecting dots that had previously been dismissed as coincidences. The notion that she might have been one more in a long line of unsuspecting victims sent a shiver down her spine. Yet, amidst the flood of despair, there emerged a resolute determination. Amalia realized that this revelation was not just a painful end to one chapter. It was the opening of a new, authentic journey, one in which she would reclaim her identity and learn to trust her own instincts. The evidence on the phone was more than just proof of past misdeeds. It was a mirror reflecting all the hidden truths that had been obscured by Daniel's carefully constructed image. Each photo and message bore the weight of countless shattered lives, and as Amalia scrolled through the painful reminders, she felt an unexpected surge of empowerment. In the midst of betrayal, she had found the strength to question the reality that had been presented to her for so long. Surrounded by the remnants of what should have been a perfect day, Amalia felt both grief and liberation. The garden, once a symbol of eternal love, now held the somber echoes of deceit. Yet, as the truth unfurled before her eyes, Amalia knew that she was not defined by the promises of a man who had betrayed her trust. Instead, she was defined by her resilience, by the loyal presence of Knox, whose silent warnings had ultimately saved her from a fate filled with regret. In that moment of painful clarity, the dark secret was no longer a source of shame. It was the catalyst for her transformation, the final piece in the puzzle of a life that was finally beginning to reveal its true colors. With the evidence of deception burning in her heart, Amalia felt a surge of determination that left no room for further pretense. The garden, now heavy with the weight of a shattered ceremony, became the stage for the confrontation that would forever alter her destiny. As guests murmured in a mixture of disbelief and sympathy, Amalia turned toward Daniel. His once calm demeanor had given way to visible tension, his eyes darting away from hers as if caught in the snare of his own lies. "Is this true?" she demanded, her voice trembling yet resolute. In that charged moment, the air was thick with the clash of conflicting truths. Daniel attempted to salvage his carefully constructed narrative with dismissive words and frantic gestures, insisting that everything was a misunderstanding, a mere twist of fate that had been blown out of proportion. But his words fell flat against the concrete evidence displayed on the phone and the silent, unwavering gaze of Knox. As the confrontation deepened, the finely honed mask that Daniel had worn for so long began to crack. His charming smiles were replaced by sharp, bitter retorts. "You're really going to trust some stranger's words over what we have?" he challenged, his tone laced with an edge that hinted at desperation and betrayal. The contradiction in his voice, the man who had once been the epitome of warmth and reliability, now spouting hollow denials, was too stark to ignore. The crowd, once eager to witness a fairy tale wedding, now watched as the carefully curated illusion dissolved before their eyes. Every glance exchanged between onlookers was charged with questions and quiet judgment. Amelia's heart pounded, not with the thrill of romance, but with the weight of painful revelation. She recalled all the subtle hints, all the times Knox's behavior had made her pause. It was as if the dog had been speaking a language only her soul could understand, a language of protection, of fierce loyalty that had saved her from a catastrophic mistake. Daniel's frustration mounted as he struggled to wrest control of the situation. His attempts to downplay the evidence only deepened the rift between his carefully maintained image and the unvarnished truth. "You've been misled," he insisted, his voice rising with an intensity that betrayed the panic within. But every word he spoke only reinforced the reality that Amalia had been forced to confront. The man she had trusted was a master of deception, a con artist whose charm had blinded her to his true nature. Standing amid the growing tension, Amalia felt an overwhelming sense of clarity. The confrontation was not just about unmasking Daniel. It was about reclaiming her identity and rejecting the lie that had been forced upon her. The murmurs from the guests, the sympathetic glances from those who had once celebrated the union, now underscored a singular truth. She deserved better than a life built on false promises. With a final, decisive look at Daniel, Amalia declared, "I will not be a part of your web of lies." In that moment, the power dynamic shifted irrevocably. The man who had once held the promise of forever now stood exposed, his charm evaporated into bitter regret. Amelia's voice, though soft, carried the strength of a woman who had finally seen through the illusion. As Knox remained steadfast at her side, his presence a silent testament to truth, Amalia knew that the confrontation was only the beginning of her journey toward healing, a journey that would redefine her future on her own terms. After the confrontation, the wedding garden, once filled with the promise of eternal love, became a silent arena of truth and shattered dreams. As the guests began to disperse in quiet clusters, Amalia found herself standing alone before Daniel, who now looked more like a man cornered by his own lies than the confident groom she once adored. His eyes, once warm and inviting, now held a cold, calculating glimmer, a final glimpse of the mask that had deceived so many. In the minutes that followed, the emotional temperature of the garden shifted dramatically. The murmurs of the crowd faded into a heavy silence, as if nature itself had paused to witness the downfall of a carefully constructed illusion. Daniel's protests, his frantic attempts to reclaim the narrative, faltered under the weight of undeniable evidence and the resolute clarity in Amelia's gaze. The mask that had once hidden his true self was crumbling away, revealing the dark undercurrents of manipulation and deceit that lay beneath. Amalia took a step forward, her heart pounding with both sorrow and a newfound strength. Every moment of doubt, every warning that Knox had given, now converged into a single, unyielding truth. The man before her was not the one who had captivated her dreams. He was a stranger in disguise, a master of pretense whose charm was nothing more than a facade. In the silence that followed, Amalia felt a bittersweet liberation as the layers of illusion peeled away, leaving behind the raw, unadorned reality of who Daniel truly was. As she faced him, Amalia realized that the fall of his mask was not just a personal victory. It was a symbolic end to the era of deception that had nearly consumed her. The air felt cooler, the shadows deeper, and in that space of vulnerability, she reclaimed the narrative of her own life. With Knox by her side, his presence a constant reminder of unwavering loyalty, she turned away from Daniel. The scene was etched in memory, a poignant lesson on the importance of trusting one's instincts and the price of ignoring the silent warnings of a devoted companion. In that decisive moment, the wedding day transformed from a celebration of an ill-fated union into a turning point in Amelia's life. The splendor of the day had faded, replaced by the raw truth of broken promises and shattered illusions. Yet, amid the ruins of what was meant to be a perfect beginning, Amalia discovered a glimmer of hope, a promise of renewal, and the possibility of a future built on authenticity rather than artifice. With a final, lingering look at the man who had deceived her, she stepped away, leaving behind the mask and the memories that no longer served her. In the quiet that followed the unraveling of the ceremony, Amalia found herself at a crossroads. The vibrant energy of the celebration had dissipated, replaced by an introspective hush that enveloped the garden. The broken fragments of a dream lay scattered around her, yet within the wreckage, she sensed an unexpected clarity. Every doubt that had once tormented her, every whispered warning from Knox, now coalesced into one undeniable truth. She deserved a life of honesty, one free from the shackles of deceit. Surrounded by lingering glances and hushed conversations among the guests, Amalia made the most painful yet empowering decision of her life. With her voice steady despite the tremor of heartbreak, she declared to Daniel, and to herself, that the promise of forever was now lost. "I cannot marry a man who has built his life on lies," she said, her words echoing through the silence like a clarion call for truth. In that decisive moment, the delicate balance between love and self-respect shifted irrevocably. The wedding that was supposed to unite two souls had instead become a testament to the strength of one who refuses to be duped. Daniel's reaction was a mixture of shock and indignation. His carefully rehearsed excuses crumbled under the weight of Amelia's resolve. He argued, pleading, and tried to convince her that it was all just a misunderstanding, a tragic miscommunication. Yet, every attempt to justify his past fell flat against the reality that now stood before them. Amelia's decision was final. With every fiber of her being, she knew that clinging to the illusion of his perfection would only lead to a future marred by regret and betrayal. As the guests watched in stunned silence, Amalia turned toward her trusted friend Lauren. In that silent exchange of understanding, the bond between them was renewed, a promise that, no matter how painful the truth, she would never have to face it alone. Lauren's nod was filled with quiet affirmation, a gesture that conveyed both sorrow and support. Together, they faced the uncertain future that now lay ahead, unburdened by the false promises of a man who had lost his power over Amelia's heart. In that moment, as the final vestiges of the wedding's magic faded into the cool evening air, Amalia realized that the decision to walk away was not an end, but rather the beginning of a journey toward rediscovering herself. The fragments of her shattered dreams would, in time, be pieced together to form a mosaic of resilience and self-love. With Knox still faithfully at her side, she embraced the bittersweet freedom of starting over, a future that, though uncertain, was built on the unwavering foundation of truth and personal integrity. In the hours that followed the tumultuous confrontation, the wedding garden slowly emptied, leaving behind only echoes of whispered regrets and fading memories. Amalia, still clad in her wedding gown that now felt more like a symbol of liberation than loss, found herself alone amidst the scattered remnants of a day that had transformed from joyous celebration to painful revelation. The once vibrant space was now shadowed by the weight of what had transpired, a silent testament to the collapse of a carefully constructed facade. Guests departed with heavy hearts and sympathetic glances, leaving Amalia and her loyal companion Knox to confront the aftermath in solitude. The garden, once filled with laughter and hopeful promises, had become an arena for introspection. Every petal on the aisle, every whisper of the wind, carried the memory of a dream that had dissolved under the pressure of truth. In the midst of the lingering silence, Amalia felt a profound mix of sorrow, relief, and unexpected gratitude. Grief washed over her not only for the loss of the life she had imagined, but also for the realization that she had been so close to a future built on deception. Yet, as she stood there with Knox at her side, she began to sense the first stirrings of a new resolve, a determination to rebuild her life on her own terms. The betrayal had left deep scars, but it also ignited a flame of self-discovery that refused to be extinguished. Daniel's absence was palpable, his departure marked by the echo of a promise broken. The scandal had rippled through the community, leaving a trail of whispered judgments and sympathetic tears. But for Amalia, the true aftermath was an inner awakening. In the solitude of that shattered moment, she began to understand that the end of one chapter was the necessary prelude to the beginning of another, a life where honesty and self-respect reigned supreme. Later that night, as she sat in the quiet of her now empty apartment, still adorned with the remnants of what was supposed to be a perfect day, Amalia allowed herself a moment of reflection. The silence was broken only by the soft, rhythmic breathing of Knox as he lay curled up at her feet. Each breath was a reminder of the steadfast loyalty that had seen her through the darkest of hours. Though her heart ached with the weight of betrayal, she also recognized a newfound freedom in the realization that she was no longer bound by the illusions of a past life. With every tear shed and every silent moment of reflection, Amalia felt herself slowly emerging from the wreckage. The pain of a broken wedding, of shattered dreams, was tempered by the promise of a future where she would reclaim her identity. And as the night deepened, a small, resolute smile broke through her sorrow, a silent vow that she would rebuild her life, one honest day at a time. In the days that followed the collapse of the wedding, Amalia found herself in a liminal space between loss and renewal. The public scandal had faded into a series of hushed conversations and media murmurs, but for her, the real work was just beginning, an internal journey of healing and rediscovery. No longer defined by the expectations of a picture-perfect romance, she began to explore the depths of her own resilience. Every morning, as the soft light of dawn crept into her modest apartment, Amalia embraced the solitude with a quiet determination. Gone was the glamorous veneer of a life planned with someone else. In its place was the raw authenticity of self-reliance. With Knox ever faithful by her side, she ventured out into the world, rediscovering small joys that had long been overshadowed by the weight of her former dreams. A leisurely stroll through the park, a quiet moment spent in a favorite cafe. Each experience became a stepping stone toward reclaiming the identity that had been buried beneath layers of expectation and deceit. In the quiet moments of reflection, Amalia began to piece together the fragments of who she once was. She recalled the times when she had volunteered at the local animal shelter, a period filled with purpose, genuine connection, and the unbridled joy of caring for those in need. It was there that she had first met Knox, whose unconditional loyalty had left an indelible mark on her heart. Those memories, though now distant, served as a reminder that true fulfillment was found not in the perfection of a facade, but in the authenticity of one's own passions and connections. Conversations with Lauren provided both solace and insight. Together, they revisited old photo albums and shared stories of past adventures, moments of laughter and spontaneity that had once defined Amalia's sense of self. With each recollection, she began to feel the stirrings of a new identity emerging from the ruins of what had been. The painful lessons of the broken wedding, though raw and unyielding, paved the way for a future where she could embrace her imperfections and celebrate her strength. The process was neither swift nor easy. There were days when the weight of betrayal threatened to overwhelm her, a reminder of the life she had almost lost to a web of lies. Yet, with each challenge, Amalia grew more resolute. The bond with Knox, the unwavering support of Lauren, and the rediscovery of her own passions formed a triumvirate of strength that propelled her forward. Slowly, the sting of the past began to fade, replaced by a gentle optimism for the future, a future in which she was the author of her own story. As the weeks turned into months, Amalia learned to navigate life with a newfound sense of purpose. The lingering echoes of what once was no longer held power over her. Instead, They became the lessons that would guide her in creating a life defined by authenticity and self-love. With each sunrise, she embraced the promise of a day unburdened by the shadows of deception, a day where every step was taken in the light of truth and the promise of renewal. Time, like a gentle river, carried Amalia away from the pain of a broken past and toward the horizon of a future reimagined. In the soft glow of a crisp autumn afternoon, she walked through the city streets, each step resonating with the strength of someone who had emerged wiser and more resilient. The memories of the shattered wedding, the bitter confrontation, and the painful unraveling of illusions had all given way to a quiet hope. A hope that came from embracing the truth and choosing a path of genuine self-discovery. Knox trotted faithfully beside her, a living reminder of the loyalty and protection that had guided her through the darkest moments. Their bond had deepened with every challenge, and as they passed by familiar landmarks, Amalia felt a profound gratitude for the silent guardian who had saved her from a future built on deceit. Together, they visited the very animal shelter where their journey had begun, a place filled with tender memories of a time when life was simple and filled with purpose. In that space, surrounded by the comforting presence of other rescued souls, she rediscovered the parts of herself that had been obscured by the glamour of a life she never truly wanted. The scars of betrayal, though still present, had softened with time. Each day was a testament to her resilience, a mosaic of moments, both small and profound, that reaffirmed her worth. Amalia began to fill her days with the simple joys of life: long walks in the park, evenings spent reading in a sunlit corner of her apartment, and quiet dinners with friends who celebrated her authenticity. The painful lessons of the past were now interwoven with a renewed commitment to living a life of honesty, courage, and self-respect. As she sat in a quaint cafe, sipping a warm cup of coffee and watching the world go by, Amalia reflected on the incredible journey that had brought her to this point. The man who had once promised a fairy tale ending had been exposed for what he truly was, a master of deception. In his place, she had discovered a strength within herself that she had never known existed. It was a strength forged in the fires of betrayal and tempered by the unwavering loyalty of a faithful friend. With each passing day, the future stretched out before her like an unwritten manuscript, full of promise and possibility. Amalia knew that there would be challenges ahead, but she was no longer afraid of the unknown. She had learned that life was not about clinging to illusions, but about embracing the truth and finding beauty in the imperfections of reality. And as she glanced down at Knox's contented gaze, she understood that the journey of self-discovery was the most rewarding adventure of all. In that moment of quiet reflection, Amalia silently vowed to build a future that honored the lessons of her past, one filled with genuine connections, self-love, and the courage to live life unburdened by deceit. With Knox by her side and the promise of a new beginning unfolding before her, she stepped forward into the light of a future that was entirely, wonderfully her own. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, subscribe, and leave a comment below with your thoughts. Your support means the world and helps bring more exciting stories to life. Hit the notification bell so you never miss the next episode. See you in the next one.